All right, more grammar. Today I'm going to go over some of these posts on options for infinitives that is a branch thread from the analysis of sentence with B number 8 thread. And this has all been, and I'm glad that Kate gave it a new name because it has definitely sprawled, the discussion has sprawled beyond merely talking about whatever example that Anne was talking about initially into a variety of theories about how to deal with infinitives in certain positions and sentences. And I was actually I was thinking, oh, I should make my own thing that's sort of like summary of the state of discussion, like do an email, but Kate already kind of did that, so I'm just gonna engage with Kate's stuff and comment on it. So, and yeah, my interpretive approach has changed. So, and this whole discussion is the example sentence was make him angry with an implied you at the beginning, and the whole point of contention was how do we interpret this part, and particularly angry, but just the whole thing. And so I've gone through a few iterations of interpretation and offered various arguments trying to get the point clear in my own mind. And Anne and Kate and Anon have all participated in that discussion, and I found it very clarifying and illuminating. So I'm just going to jump to the bottom of it because, and then I'm going to go scroll up and go through it. But I think what Kate is calling option 3 is my current position, which I also take to be the position of the Anon who was in this thread at some point, which is that for make him angry, you read it as subject implied you, verb make, object is him, to be is an implied infinitive, and angry. And then within the object, we break it down and we say the subject is him. The implied infinitive is basically serving the verb role, and angry is a predicate adjective. And so the manner of relation between angry and him is basically through this infinitive, which is serving as a linking verb. And so Kate says about this interpretation. So we have an infinitive clause acting as the direct object. Essentially, I think these infinitive clauses are a type of noun clause, i.e., a group of words with both a subject and a verb, all right, who function right. A group of words with both a subject and verb who function as one noun unit. Right, because it's serving the theory is that this group of words is serving as the direct object. And so that's to be a direct object, you have to be a noun. So if you have a group of words serving as the object, then that group of words has to be a noun by definition. And so I think that's right so far. In this case, they function as the direct object. Okay. So some noun clauses have a finite verb in their clause. She forgot that it was my birthday. Right. So the finite verb is was. Oh, I'm sorry. Forgot. For some reason, I jumped to analyzing. Well, actually, wait. No. Hey, this is why it can be helpful to be more methodical. Because, right, because Kate's talking about the noun clause, right, which is this part. She, right, subject, she, verb, forgot. So in this clause, that is like just a conjunction, right? It's not actually doing anything. It was birthday. That's the meat of the sentence. So this is just word glue. I like that. I like the term word glue for conjunction. It's fewer syllable. Anyway, so that's a conjunction, and then, or actually, then the object. Well, now wait a second. So I think that this example is similar to an example that Eliot talks about in his grammar materials, where he says that he considers the sentence. Right? So he considers, I think that school is boring, and basically says that the meaning here is school is boring. I think that. So, and right, because that actually isn't a conjunction, it's a pronoun. So I think the meaning here is like it was my birthday, she forgot that. So that is serving both as a pronoun and as a because normally pronouns stand for something that was already introduced. Like John came into the room, period. He was angry, period. He is standing for John. Whereas because of the way the sentence is structured, the actual the actual thing, the referent, that's kind of a fancy word, but you could say the thing that the pronoun is pointing to, but I just say that's the referent. The referent of the pronoun comes later. And so instead of the pronoun pointing back to an earlier time, you can think of it kind of pointing forward. But then to figure out the real structure and meaning of the sentence, you have to rearrange things a bit. So I think given that that isn't really like a conjunction, I think then it makes, well, right, because, so yeah, where it's getting stuck is, because if you have two clauses, I see. So I was referring to Eliot's grammar stuff in like off screen, so I figured I should at least bring the part I was carefully scrutinizing on screen so people could see. So, because basically we have two clauses, but then we do need some sort of conjunction. And I was wanting, for whatever reason, to think that that was the conjunction. But really, how Eliot resolves it is he treats there as there being an implied and. So, so you see the structure here. There's a conjunction. The verbs are primary. They're like the conjunctions. The implied conjunction is at the highest level. Is basically Eliot's treating the sentence as having like a sort of a semicolon. So you have that. Right, because if you had school is boring and I think that, like that would be fine. So that that is almost like a dummy pronoun. Right, so it's kind of like the expletive stuff. So for example, for something like it is important that you work hard for the exam. If you want to analyze the subject, you basically the it drops out and you say that you work hard for the exam is important. That's the actual that's the subject verb complement relationship. This whole thing is the subject, even though it comes at the end. And this is the verb, and important is the complement. So the it just drops off completely. So this is a bit similar. So under this analysis, then, under this analysis, that school is boring is not actually serving as the direct object. So basically, I just quoted Eliot's analysis of this "I think that school is boring" sentence and linked a picture of the diagram. So under this sort of analysis, what noun clauses would be legitimate? That's a question I had. And so I started thinking. And so I found some examples. And this sort of thing, whichever restaurant you pick, that seems fine to me to call a noun clause. It is a clause. I think the structure is you pick whichever. Or maybe it's you pick restaurant and whichever modifies restaurant. Because this says it can be a determiner used to emphasize a lack of restriction in selecting one of a definite set of alternatives. So if it just said whichever you pick is fine with me, then I think it would be the object. But since it's whichever restaurant you pick, maybe it's then just a modifier. But anyway, this whole thing I think is fine to say. Let me make this bigger. I think it's fine to say this whole thing is serving as a medium. For do you know what the weather will be? I think it's fine to say. It's like the beginning here is you subject. Do know is like the verb with do as an auxiliary, and then what the weather will be is the object. And the internal structure is the weather will be what. So there's no extraneous words like with I think that school is boring. School is boring is a complete clause, but with the weather, what the weather will be, if you think about the internal structure, the weather will be what? You need each thing there to have a full clause. So that fact is a distinction compared to this scenario where this clause is kind of complete, but then we have I think something, and so we need to complete that. We have this that. We need to complete the thought I think X. And we have this that. And so we use the that to complete the thought, right? And also to point forward to the next clause. Is the idea here, because right, so I think when we have a sentence like this, where we have a sensible two separate clause interpretation, where we actually have enough words, well, it's not really number of words. It's more like if if you want to say that there's two separate that there's two entirely separate clauses with that have like a conjunction between them, then you need something like you need enough sort of key critical words so that you can have the pattern like subject verb object subject verb complement. And in this sentence we have that, at least under Eliot's reading. But in something like, I just looked up the difference between like what I've been calling auxiliary verbs and what I think of more as modal or helper verbs. And this page says that primary auxiliaries, it says a modal verb is an auxiliary verb, but an auxiliary verb is not necessarily a modal verb. So primary auxiliaries can function both as a main verb. Do, I think, is in that category, or as a helper. I have a car. I have seen her. And this one, it's have is the main verb, and this one, it's like the helper. Whereas stuff like may, might, can, could, shall, will, etc. are modal auxiliaries. They can't function as main verbs, so they need a real verb to come after them. So because with this sentence, like you do know, rewritten, right? You do know what? That could be the subject verb object clause. I just changed stuff because I had like the word meaning and then the rewriting, but I don't think that's like, oh, that's the real meaning. I think it's more just like a rewriting for clarity. So I just put rewritten. So you do know what? That's a clause. The weather will be what? That's a clause. So the rewritings are just about making the clause structure explicit and putting it into the standard subject verb object or complement form. Now, with I think that school is boring, we have subject verb object, subject verb object. No shared words in the rewritten version. But with do you know what the weather will be? After we rewrite both the main sentence and the noun clause direct object, we have a shared word. So they're not separate, they're stuck together. So we can't do the same type of analysis we did in terms of the structure. So we have to do something else. All right, so I did some diagramming and I referred to Eliot's grammar materials more. And so I think that, I think I was saying earlier, there's a couple cases to distinguish, which is when you have something where like that is serving as a forward reference and is serving as the object of one of the clauses versus when you have a word like say who and John who met me likes pizza, which is serving like two roles, which is both relating the clause to another clause and um, is also serving as part of the structure of the clause that it's in. So I think that with she forgot that it was my birthday, she forgot that it was my birthday is like, I think that school is boring. So we have the conjunction, we have I, think is the verb, I and that are underneath, and then is is the governing word in its clause, and we have school and boring underneath. And likewise, so this is an implied conjunction, and so forgot governs she and that, was governs it and birthday, and then my is modifying birthday. And for comparison, so we have or is it? Do you know what the weather will be? So this is kind of like, well, let me see if I can find a better example actually. Right, so I like this example better. Whoever did it is smart. So the analysis that Eliot does is whoever is smart is sort of the core. And like the core main clause structure. So whoever serving as a pronoun, but it's also in this whoever, so to speak. I mean, it's one whoever, but at the level of the sentence structure, whoever is serving as the pronoun, and it's also, or this pronoun subject, and it's also relating this top level sentence to whoever did it. And then we analyze that, and within that sentence, it's also the subject. But notice, looking at it like this, we don't actually say like whoever did it is the subject, right? We say whoever is the subject a couple times, but it doesn't, in other words, whoever did it, well, I guess, actually, never mind on that particular thought. Because I guess it is like by relating the rest of the clause, it is sort of turning it into a noun. So scratch that. But right, so that's the basic structure is whoever whoever is wearing a couple different hats. It's actually, so I misspoke. It's, at this level of the sentence, it's not serving as a subject, but it's turning this whole thing into the subject. And then, so that's at the big level of the overall sentence structure. Whoever did it is smart. It's serving as a relator, I think. And then within whoever did it, that's when it's serving as the subject. I think that's right. So, likewise, well, actually, right, so likewise, do you know what the weather will be? What, in, when we're looking at the whole sentence, you do know what is serving as a relator, a pronoun relator, and it's connecting so what is connecting this overall sentence to the noun clause direct object, and then within that noun clause direct object, the weather will be what? It's serving as the object, so it appears twice. And it appears twice because we need it twice in order to have all the essential functions of the sentence, the key sentence parts that we need fulfilled. We need a relator word, or whatever you want to call it, functioning in this object role at the top level of the sentence structure. And we also need an object here.